Thanks, Dr. DeCarlo. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll just do a quick introduction for Dr. DeCarlo. So Dr. Matt DeCarlo earned his PhD in social work at Virginia Commonwealth University and his MSW from George Mason University. His research interests include education, equity, labor rights, student wellness and basic needs, licensure examinations, and other workforce development initiatives for students and early career social workers. He's the author of 2 free and openly licensed textbooks, Scientific Inquiry in Social Work and Graduate Research Methods in Social Work, a project-based approach. And additionally, he is the co-founder of Open Social Work, a collaborative that advances knowledge, equity, in social work through open scholarly practices, open access, open education, and open science. So welcome, Dr. DeCarlo, and we're excited to learn more.
Cool. Thanks so much, Aiden. All right. Thanks, everyone. I just sort of wanted to start off by gauging people's familiarity with conferences and conferencing. How many people here, either if you want to unmute yourself and just say yes, or just raise your hand, or just, indicate in some kind of visual or text-based way if you've presented at any kind of academic or professional conferences in the past. Yeah, awesome. Okay. I think, and so I just got back from the NASWPA conference today. So the reason why I asked that is because know I didn't know what exactly would be most helpful to share. I think that the most helpful thing I have to share for people who already know what the heck this is about, and like what conferencing is this particular resource right here. So this is one of the textbooks that Ada mentioned. This is the last chapter of the Graduate Research Methods in Social Work textbook. If you scroll down just a bit, I'm going to steal your screen just for a hot second. It has this fancy academic conference table. So this is, if you are trying to reach social work educators, some examples of slightly outdated list from 2021, 2022 publication date. But these are from 2020, when these conferences are offered, when proposals are due, who attends those conferences, and who you might be interested in sort of connecting with at each one of those events. The biggest ones in social work are the ones listed up here. Please, I'm just, everybody's from North America and from US specifically, so I'm just going to talk about US specific social work. So the Council on Social Work Education's annual program meeting, I know that some of y'all have presented there. Yes? P4P people? Cool. Do people, I think the sort of difference between some of those conferences and some of the other conferences are both by culture and also by the kind of people that you are likely to meet at those conferences. If, for example, you would like to make inroads with the important researchers at your institution, the Society for Social Work and Research is those people. This conference focused pretty heavily on quantitative research. So if you were showing up to that conference talking about social work, paid practicums, you better have some good quantitative data. On the other hand, BPD is one of the best teaching conferences I've been to. They are affiliated and are part of CSWE in some kind of way that I do not understand, but they focus mostly on baccalaureate education. And this is a conference that is much more focused on the teaching aspect, whereas much more focused on the more research-based part of social work, like, capital R research methods, NIH grant type people. And CSWE is where all of those people kind of come together. CSWE is the largest conference, I believe, in the United States of social workers. And it's their annual program meeting. It's this awful name, CSWE APM. And yeah, so there are a number of academic conferences that sort of extended beyond the United States, the International Federation of Social Work, SWSD, and then the SWESD, they split up in 2020. So like these international clinical societies no longer conference with these people. I don't know whether they skip a year or something. They were just in Central or South America this year. I forget where. But those conferences are obviously much more geared towards global social work. However, it is also the place where everybody talks about what sort of social work practices exist across cultures. Good place to find international colleagues potentially. This, on the other hand, I would consider not that one. Sorry, uh, he's from Our Lady of the Lake, Eduardo. Yeah. So your alma mater used to put on the best social work distance education conference in the United States. The Social Work Distance Education Conference is not affiliated with CSWE. It is mostly all of those, or all of the programs that emerged in the like late 2000s to like, 2010s boom of online social work programs. They all came together. And so this conference tends to be not just faculty and field directors, but people who are a lot more in tune with the kinds of students that need paid practicums the most, the kinds of institutions that are primarily online, primarily that have started in the last 10 or 20 years, and therefore don't have as many of those rigid norms around placement versus job or placement. So social work distance education conference is one place I would go to target faculty members who may be a little bit more along your, or who may be more open to implementing P4P. The last one, the macro conference, they've rebranded so many times, but I like the new one. Yeah, where's our macro 2.0 conference? Yes. So all of these places changed which place they are going to be in. It looks like they're still in St. Louis this year. Excellent. All right. So the macro conference is a COSA, and Pilar, you might know better than I do, influencing social policy, and I think some other macro organizations. Do you know the other ones off the top of your head? No. All right,
It's
cool.
okay. It's always changing too. So.
It's the both, political social workers and the community organizers all together talking about macro social work. So these are the academic conferences within North America that are focused on a national audience. In addition to these, there are specific conferences for individual like NASW states. There are also professional conferences. So practice focused conferences, I don't have a lot of like there isn't a big list of all of the different subspecialties social work conferences, but it is likely that every subspecialty within social work has its own conference. Like sports social work has their own, health, hospice, and palliative care has their own. Most specializations have some kind of either national or national conference, virtually or in person. So using each one of those, taking P4P into different settings can be helpful. Similarly, there are conferences that are more practice focused, like AUCD, that might focus on, I use this example to talk about like interdisciplinary conferences, more practice focused conferences. So I think when you were thinking about the conference presentation that you might want to have, just trying to figure out, do you want to reach more of a professional audience? Do you want to reach more of an academic audience? I was at the NASWPA conference today. I went to a bunch of education sessions with like a bunch of people I recognized, and there were like 6 or 7 of us there, and there were maybe 100 people at the overall conference. So what, do you guys know all the things that you could do at a conference where you can have your, oral presentation, which is the most common thing. Also, a workshop where you teach people some kind of it. Roundtable presentations are a lot more informal. Panel presentations, which I was on today, are also a little bit more informal, but can allow you to get multiple diverse viewpoints, also with a minimum of prep, because panels are usually designed with Q&A in mind. But because all of those places, with the exception maybe of roundtables, are kind of competitive, a lot of people end up doing posters. Did you guys get sent to the poster room? Yeah, I've done it. Here, hang on. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Here we go. Sorry. Yeah, the poster room. So the poster room can go a couple of different ways because sometimes it's where scholarship goes to die. In other times, like because if you are at like the 7:30 a.m. poster session on Sunday morning, nobody's coming to your stuff. And unless you have like the people who wake up at like that early in the morning, and it's fine. The other part of this is a lot of times they will put the poster presentations alongside the vendors. So like you'd be walking around and like going to say like, oh, this is the people who do field education software, and you know, I'm presenting on why they're evil or whatever it is. So it kind of looks like this. The best version of this that I have seen, and I would encourage you, if you see a conference that does this, this is a good way to actually talk to people, is to do it at a cocktail hour, do it at a food event. And so when you have that, it is now the thing. You are now the entertainment. You are the thing where people are sort of perambulating around. It tends to be the most favorable environment I've had to people actually coming over and asking you about your work. Um, so I don't know. Conferences need to go on, rain or shine. This is me and my son at a conference. I think it was at BPD in Florida, right after my wife got food poisoning. All of the people at conferences, at the conference, chasing around their kids, or were nice enough to be watching those people. And so it's important to note that these things are not equitable towards everybody. And so, hang on one second here. No, I think the virtually connecting, it's not really a group that does a lot in social work, but was very active in international education spaces and making the argument that because conferences themselves are so exclusionary because they take thousands of dollars to attend. Like I get $1,500 as a faculty member, and I have to stretch that across however many conferences I get accepted to, regardless of the actual cost. For most practitioners, they get a professional development budget of $0. So it's not really it's not the best way to do it. So virtually connecting is or was set up as a way to try and get people who are presenting at conferences to talk to people via Zoom in a more conversational way about what it is that they were doing. This is not a thing that exists in social work, but I bring it up as just sort of a way to think about some of the inherent like inequities that are a part of conferences and who can get to be a part of them and who can't. The last thing that I will tell you, and sorry for running around in here, is this. So uh, in addition to this stuff and kind of how I got into P4P advocacy and work was through open textbooks and open education. And so one of the things that I did was just like, you can schedule a meetup. You don't have to be on the agenda. I mean, you can, but like if there's a large listserv of the people who are going to be there, and you say like, we're all going to meet up at this lounge and talk about this thing. I didn't make this up. Like I copied this from the people who did this for people who teach research methods, because we need to commiserate with each other at academic conferences because no one likes to learn research methods from us. And so that's a real thing that happens. This is a real thing that I was trying to replicate. And you can do these things. These are things where you can present informally. People have to take lunch at some point. Why not make it a lunch where you are learning and networking with other people about a topic that's vital and interesting to others? There also are sometimes pre-conference workshops, which are kind of hard to get into, but if there's, good enough buy-in. Similarly, there are sometimes pre-conference like events and happenings. So like before CSWE, all the directors meet and do their important directors thing, and there are special presentations for them. So there's a lot that sort of goes into conferencing. The last thing that I will just say, I don't really know how long I'm supposed to talk for or have talked for, is that one of the things I enjoyed the most today was just lingering after people's presentations and dear God, bring business cards. Be better than me. Bring business cards to your presentations, and also the conferences themselves are often places where you guys have to linger and meet and talk with other people. I made a bunch of new connections today that I now have to touch base on. I don't really know where any of them are going to go, but I was always late. I was always sort of running in between places, but I ended up feeling sort of a lot more connected with the community that I was in. When I went to my first CSWE APM, it was one of the most eye-opening experiences I had had at that point in my social work career. And it was really inspirational for me to sort of get a sense of like what everybody was doing and how just big everything is inside of social work. So yeah, it's been fun to do that stuff. I don't know. Does that help?
That is super helpful. Thank you so much, Dr. DeCarlo. I love that. It was a great overview of like what conferences are out there, what type of activities we can get involved in, and then just things we can think about before, during, and after the conference. So thank you so much for that summary. We'll now have Dr. Susan Klumpner share her thoughts as well. So let me get this started. There we go. And if you'd like to share your screen, that'll work too.
Awesome. Yeah. In a second. But I just wanted to like quickly comment on Dr. DeCarlo's presentation, which was fantastic. I love that you like made it super interactive. I'm already second guessing like the slides that I have prepared. But I also very much appreciate like you going into the differences between these conferences, because it really depends on like you should select your conferences based on the audience that you're, wanting to interact with. And also, I think the ways in which I'll present sort of like around my research really is suggestive. You can almost infer, right? Because it's at CSWE and because it's at SWR, I'm interested in connecting with educators and I'm interested in connecting with social work faculty. So thanks for that. Is it okay for me to just continue?
Yeah, let me introduce you while
Okay.
you pull up your screen if you're going to share it. And then, yeah, we can dive in. So, Dr. Susan Klumpner is the Director of Field Education at the University of Chicago's Crown Family School of Social Work Policy and Practice, as well as the part-time Executive Director and Field Instructor at the ACE Project, a nonprofit organization that provides free youth development and workforce development programs in Chicago, Baltimore, and Detroit. She has past experience as a former school social worker and extensive knowledge in the design, implementation, and evaluation of after-school programming for low-income students of color in urban settings. And previously, Dr. Klumpner was a research assistant at Chapin Hall, evaluating professional development programs for after-school providers, and was selected as a fellow to the CSWE Minority Fellowship Program, servicing underrepresented and underserved communities at risk for mental health or substance abuse disorders. She previously taught for the MSW program at University of Maryland, University of Michigan, and was a lecturer at Widener University and the Crown Family School of Social Work Policy and Practice. And she received her bachelor's degree in psychology from Grinnell, her master's in social service administration from the Crown Family School, and her doctorate in social work from the University of Maryland. So I will let Dr. Klumpner take it away.
Thank you so much. That was quite a mouthful. I was actually hoping you would skip right by that. I just want to say that I apologize for folks who have actually already seen much of this presentation because it was presented based off of spring 2023 data at CSWE last year. And then I'll talk a little bit towards the end of the presentation in terms of where we see the future of our research heading, including, a lot of including sort of like the follow-up study that we have to this data that I'll present on. I also want to mention, feel free to leverage this data. I know that it's going to be specific for the state of Illinois and our field site partners, but certainly it could, it could sort of help make a case or an argument for the state that you are sort of, advocating for, and or the national movement. I first wanted to kind of recognize the other folks who are on my research team who are not here today. Minnie, who's works within field education at Loyola University, as well as Lisa at Trinity Christian College. I don't necessarily have to regurgitate sort of the importance, I think, of why this movement exists. But I do think that it is really important to have really strong sort of problem and need-based statements in order to sort of carry our work forward together. So as we all know that CSWE, our accreditation body, adheres to 900, asks us to complete MSW students 900 hours in their 2-year program. I know certainly during my MSW career, I didn't necessarily consider being paid for these internships, but I also understand that that was a different time. And we have different students also entering the social work profession, as well as just there are just different student experiences. There have obviously been conversations about the changing landscape of social work education, our profession's continued commitment to social justice, sort of recognizing everything that this meeting opened with, the rising costs of higher education, financial, employment, family, other obligations that students face, requirement for field education that places a disproportionate burden on students of color, first-gen students, students from other marginalized populations, and seeking ways to alleviate some of these barriers through paid internship opportunities. In addition, there's the question of social justice and equity also as it relates to unpaid internships, which I'm very excited that I saw about a month ago that CSWE did release their position statement in partnership with the National Student P4P movement. And I also would make the argument, right, that in 2022, CSWE released the EPOS, Educational Policy and Accreditation Standards, that explicitly asks us as social work educators to address anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, including what that piece means in terms of students' access to social work education. Oops. Yeah, so unpaid internships obviously discriminate against those who can't afford to work without financial compensation. So it's really our responsibility as employers, third-party internship placement organizations, and schools to reform policies that limit access and equity. Paid internships are one aspect of improving equity and fairness to this system. Now, I have like 25 slides and now 12 remaining minutes. So I will just quickly also recognize the consortium, right? So it was a collaboration with all of these universities. So I know that not every state has like a field directors consortium, an organized group of folks to kind of troubleshoot practicum issues, learn from one another in terms of educating folks about their internship and practicum in a large setting. But I would encourage folks for states that don't to organize, make contact with. I'm certain that through conferences, folks have been able to connect with other folks who work within field education to create this network. I'll also say that one way in which that I advocate for paid internships too is by leveraging my position within the consortium and as well as my skill set. In the breakout groups, it's evident that a lot of folks who are interested in this movement have data analytics skills, have research experience. It is in dire need, right? And so I know that in order to work in field education, certainly you don't need a PhD, and I'm not saying you need a PhD to do research at all, but we do need folks who are interested in looking at sort of program evaluation data. And so this consortium made a concerted effort to try to follow up with every single one of our field partners. And so I wanted to share the survey results that was collected between March 13th, 2023 to March 28th, 2023. And so for the purpose of this survey, we included paid internships as well as financial remunerations, including stipends, reimbursements, trainings. This also included work-based internships. And so just looking at this, right? So we had 10 universal questions on our survey with skip patterns depending on whether or not you provide, a field agency provides a stipend or does not provide a stipend. So it did take about 10 minutes, even with the skip pattern, which, you know, obviously would include 11 more items than previously thought. And then in terms of, you know, our data source, I mean, we sent this to all of our partners. And so as you'll see, is that we got a fairly large response. Now, I don't have the exact population of all of the field instructors or field sites that everybody contacted, but everybody was funneled to take this survey. And so originally there were 619 completed entries, and through cleaning and discussions and, you know, getting rid of duplicate entries, we ended up with a final sample size of 593. This is a huge data set. And so to give you some information about what we found, is that half of the agencies that we surveyed were primarily within Cook County, which is the city of Chicago, plus the collar cities surrounding. So that was certainly most of the field placement. What this indicates to me is that most of the field placements are in urban settings. And then 35% are just, you know, also in Illinois, just not within Cook County. And then there were, you know, some agency partners that resided outside and some who just didn't specify. In terms of size of organization, again, this is being able to describe our sample set. So 58% of our full data set has 50 or more employees. Obviously, this is like obviously we had larger organizations like completing this survey. And in terms of the estimated budget of the agencies that we surveyed, we had 30%, approximately 30% of the agency that completed this survey had a budget of 3 million or more. So in our follow-up survey, we specifically actually instruct, and so you'll see this note down here, that 40% of the respondents were actually unsure of their agency budget. And so I actually took their responses out. So in our follow-up survey, we specifically instruct to have the person at the agency or the administrator who is aware of the organizational budget or departmental budget to complete the survey. Oftentimes what we found is that field instructors are not aware of how large their organization is across all the different departments or even what their budget is within their department. So this is key information. Of these nearly 600 agencies that we surveyed, a third of the agencies were already providing a stipend. And so we segmented agencies that currently provide a stipend from agencies that do not, to try to gather more information about them. And then so you'll see here that over half of the agencies that provide a stipend, so this is only the sample size of 189, 54% of them include that in a lump sum versus hourly, and then not reported. So we had to clean the data pretty significantly. So we were really only looking at lump sum versus hourly. In this follow-up survey of data that was just collected last month that we're presenting at CSWE next week, we actually ask what the hourly rate is, because the Consortium of Field Directors has found that that's the most common question that folks are asking us, that our agency partners are asking us. So if we think about moving away from a stipend for internship and moving towards a fair hourly wage, we want to sort of ensure that, like, you know, our partners are working towards what that hourly wage or that hourly rate would be. In terms of, so the level of student eligible for monetary compensation, this is no surprise probably, right? So 3%, only 6 of the 189 agencies said that they compensate only first level MSW students or BSWs. A little less than half were only compensate second level MSWs. And then the other complete half is all levels. That was actually quite interesting to me, right? I made the assumption that the majority of the respondents would probably say it was second level MSW, but in fact, it was, and I think it probably is a quality thing around internships within departments, is that if we offer a second year intern and we have a first year intern, we also should be offering them monetary compensation. Monetary compensation includes both stipends and hourly rates. We also found that in terms of the frequency of when stipends are being distributed, the most common responses were biweekly or bi-quarter. Certainly, I would advocate for biweekly as much as possible. We know that students need to keep their cash flow going. And certainly, next to that, obviously, would be like once a month, then per semester, then annual. But at least it gives you sort of an indication of where we stand. We actually asked this question again in the follow-up survey to see if any of the responses have changed. In terms of, so number of interns that are typically at an agency. So over half, right, of the agencies said that they support 1 or 2 students. And then there was about a quarter that said that they support 5 or more students, right? So it's interestingly 1 to 2 interns is the most typical, but 5 or more also is, right? So we have agencies, again, that have really large budgets with really high, like a higher number of FTEs, full-time employees, that are providing paid internships. On the flip side, we're also seeing that only 1 or 2 interns are also being supported within an agency, which is interesting too. And so in terms of the longevity of providing monetary compensation, here you'll see that within the last year, 29% of our agencies within the state of Illinois that we surveyed now provide some sort of compensation. The greatest obvious percentage is within the last 2 to 4 years. And what this indicates to me is that hopefully we are trending such that, there are more agencies, right, providing stipends or monetary compensation. This is another question, though, that we are going to be able to track with the sites that responded to our follow-up survey. So we'll be able to map year over year whether or not they continue to provide that stipend. My ultimate dream is to be able to track this change longitudinally, right? To see whether or not change each year is statistically meaningful. God, I have so many more slides. So I will try to wrap it up in the next 5 minutes. But I did want to describe also the sites that do not provide a stipend. And so again, this is 404 agencies said that they do not currently provide a stipend, monetary compensation. Of this group, a little over a quarter has considered providing a stipend, but the majority of this pie, right, is that no, they have not considered providing a stipend. But then we have 34 people of this 404 saying that they did not know stipend was an option. Right. So I look at these 34 agencies as agencies that the consortium then can reach out to, right, and ask if they have any follow-up questions. Now, one of the key things that we're presenting on next week is an informational toolkit for folks to be able to bring to agency partners who just are interested in, sort of what the hourly rate is, How frequently are you distributing? How do you set up a fund like this? And all of that is absolutely informed by this information. And then just also looking at this, barriers for not providing compensation, to no surprise, is that it's a lack of funding or no budget for this. And then other reasons, everybody gave all kinds of reasons, but it wasn't necessarily all thematic, if that makes sense. So lack of funding is really the takeaway from this slide. And then also other forms of compensation offered. So what we're looking at is the majority of folks said that like there was no other compensation offered. So, but at least you have 60%, around 60% that are providing some kind of compensation, but it's not monetary, right? So we're looking at bus passes, mileage reimbursements, maybe free lunch or free meals, paid trainings, or multiple of these, right? That was also, that was the next highest response, is that folks are not just providing one of these things, but multiple forms of them. And then I thought that this might be really, this could be a point of intervention, right, for our consortium, is that the 65% of the folks who do not provide a stipend are actually wanting to learn more about it. So it's these 240 of the 404 that we're going to be reaching out to with the toolkit. And then in terms of, this one also might be really interesting for y'all too, awareness of the student national P4P movement. And this was only asked for sites that do not provide a stipend. So we were curious to see, have you even heard of P4P? And, you know, about a third said, yes, they have. Okay. And then 60% said that they did not, have never heard of it. So we didn't ask this question again, but maybe we should have in the follow-up survey. But specifically, we were wondering how many sites were aware of this, and if they weren't, that then it would be able to spread awareness about the P4P movement. So they haven't heard about it. What is it? Let me go see what it is, right? Especially for folks who want to provide paid opportunities, but just don't have the details on how. The qualitative results, obviously, they could take, I mean, it could take 10 more minutes, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that to you tonight, but maybe later it would make sense to kind of go through some of the themes that our team has identified as a result of sort of the qualitative portion of the survey. But I did want to tell you a little bit more about the next steps. So as I mentioned, we just collected data from the 189 respondents that are providing a stipend or monetary compensation. Out of the 189 respondents who are, 52 of them chose to complete the follow-up survey. 25% response rates, that's not bad, it's not bad. So they completed a 12-item questionnaire. It took maybe about 5 to 10 minutes. It was just collected, and it's really going to inform the toolkit that we present along with the data that was collected last year. Yeah, and so I think, you know, just following up with our student group, student P4P, ensuring that they have this information as well as the national movement. And then what we also plan on doing is we will be presenting at SWIR, which is the conference where a lot of faculty present their quantitative data and things like that. What's particularly exciting about presenting there is that this is an exploratory study. As you may have seen, this is just descriptive data. This is where we're starting. Let's just describe what people are doing. Out of the 52 survey respondents in the follow-up survey, 30 of them consented to be interviewed or participate in a focus group. And so this project continues to evolve. we're always looking for folks who want to volunteer their time too. You don't necessarily have to be from the state of Illinois, but this is sort of my contact information as long as my research colleagues, should folks want to connect more in the future.